Thank you everyone for giving me a chance to speak. So just in case you haven't driven out to the airport in the last 3 years, we've done a bit of work out there. Just the largest WA project or infrastructure project to date, shortly to be superseded, but not yet. So there was 5 interchanges, 12 bridges and 3 bath structures. We had to build the bath structures because part of the road actually falls below the groundwater level. So there's a little thing for you. The project was funded by the Australian government as well as the state government, and it was delivered under an alliance scheme known as the Gateway WA Alliance. The Gateway WA Alliance, it's a joint party basically of Main Roads, CPB contractors, Giorgio, BG&E, GHD and ACOM. So we went for an IS rating. We actually went for 2. We went for the design and we went for the as-built. So Katrina O'Mara led up the design team initially, and then the responsibility for the as-built fell over to myself. You'll note that in terms of what we actually got awards for on the design rating was heavily over in the materials and the waste side, but not so much under the heritage and stakeholder side. It actually dramatically changed later on, where we actually did quite well under heritage and stakeholder, but we didn't perform as good as we hoped under materials and waste. So it just goes to show that even if you put procedures in place at the beginning, your predictions are X, Y and Z, you might actually come out with something that looks a little bit different than what you actually originally thought you were going to do. So whilst Kat set us up well on 50.6 and we got up to 63.6 by the end, it actually meant that some of those points we lost under the 50, so we had to regain them as well during the as-built. Now, I'm just going to go through some of our sustainability initiatives that we did out at Gateway. In majority of the slides down in the bottom right-hand corner, for those that are familiar with the ISCA or the IS tool, there will be a reference to the credit and level and number of, and the points that we received for those initiatives. Not on the next slide though, but then on the ones following. So generally out at Gateway, we had this key focus to reduce waste, not just of what we sent off site, but also what we brought into site. So for the greater Perth area, we looked at bringing in other people's waste from other projects and also taking some of our own would-be waste and treating it on site and using it as fill and as soil for our plants. Some of the material, even though it wasn't great to begin with, after processing it still had quite a lot of nutrient values, so it was able to be used as soils. So overall, our recycled waste was 20% of total fill, or 30% of what was brought in. And while that still doesn't seem as lovely as saying 80% or something like that, it's still 1.2 million tonnes of earth we're talking about here. So no small feat really. So just in terms of our recycled sources, we managed to get about 670,000 tonnes from other Perth projects, including the Perth Airport. Some of it didn't need any treatment at all, and other bits did. Some of it was required to be treated for acid sulphate soils, or some of it had overburden in it that needed to be screened out. We also got in almost 400,000 tonnes from commercial suppliers as well. So overall, you can see the breakdown here of what recycled materials we used, but about half of it came from the Perth Airport area. Now on site, we had our treatments facility set up. It was able to treat material that was acidic, so your acid sulphate soils, or your materials such as topsoil or other sands that had overburden in it, or too large objects basically. So we were able to sieve out everything, remove the waste. We also treated it for acidity if it was required, and then we used it out on our project. It was actually the first construction project to get a licence to treat other people's waste, which we thought was pretty good, but it also just goes to show, just because we're here for a limited time doesn't mean that we can't actually help other people out around us. We also were the first Main Roads project that were allowed to use fill that had some organic content in it as well. And just for our own savings on site, it worked out to be about $200,000 worth of savings just for our own material, let alone the cost of everyone else that's bringing it into site. Like any project, unless you go through and dig up every teaspoon of dirt out on your job site before you go to build it, you're never going to figure out exactly if you've got any contamination there. So we ended up coming across a couple of large contaminated sites, but we were able to look after them pretty well within our project. We used the remediation hierarchy, which led to us being able to remediate the material on site basically. We had about 32,000 cubic metres of contaminated material. Majority of it was contaminated with old construction rubble and asbestos. And we were able to go through and process that on site and reduce it down to just 4,500 kilograms of asbestos, which basically equates to about, I think, 4 or 5 skip bins worth of it. So quite a small thing that went to landfill. If we had sent everything straight to landfill and not processed it on site, it would have cost us about $7 million all up. So with $1.3 million worth of cost to go through and treat the material, we were able to save $6 million. We also managed to do it without having a huge impact on our program due to our construction team being able to shake things up and move it around and get everything sorted in a timely manner in any case. Our waste disposal practices on site, we kept them as simple as possible, but that meant that they were quite effective. We got a waste contractor in to supply us with skip bins, and they took all of our construction waste off the job and they went and processed it and sorted it. We were a project with at most 1,000 people on the job on any particular day, and not the same people every day. There was no way we could enforce a separation technique on site with just the huge number of people coming through. The processes in place by the waste suppliers were also fantastic to go through and remove all of the landfill waste and then also get it down to a product where they could process it and turn it into a recycled construction fill product. This led to the Gateway project recycling approximately 95% of all of its construction waste. And then also in our offices, we managed to recycle 67% of our office waste. We also had a lot of greenery out there, so we needed to implement a very strategic flora and fauna management plan. It meant that we managed to relocate over 120 bandicoots, among other animals, on site. You can see a little baby bandicoot up there, that is not a little rat. Just for those that aren't familiar with bandicoots. We also had a great technique at the beginning of the job where a surveyor went through with the environment team and highlighted and took the locations of all of the significant trees along the would-be clearing line of what the design was at the time. Any significant trees, by the way, out at Gateway was anything over 150 mil in diameter at breast height and native. So we had about 1,000 of them picked up. The design team then went through and worked out whether or not they could tweak the design in locations to go through and retain trees on site. And so that's what you can see through here is the designers green lighting some trees, unfortunately putting the ones that couldn't be saved in red. We've also propagated about 2,300 rare plants. These are 2 different species for our offsets on site. And we managed to also sneak in one fauna underpass. When you're driving from the Leach Tonkin interchange into the airport, you're actually going over an underpass. And we had a little visitor the other day, went all the way through and seems to be using it quite happily, which is a great outcome. Now, with our stakeholder network throughout Gateway, there was a lot of people that wanted input on the project, and we knew that at the beginning of the job. So we needed to go through and highlight how we were going to communicate with them, because the old saying goes, too many cooks spoil the broth. We couldn't have everyone making every decision with us. So unfortunately this graphic's a bit hard to read, but essentially we worked out our stakeholders that we would collaborate with, the ones that we would involve, and the ones that would mostly just be informed upon. So it meant that we were able to empower quite a lot of people to make decisions on our behalf, such as the local government authorities with deciding how we would do some traffic diversions and staging of them and things like that. We also weren't just employed to come out and build a road. We had to build the Grand Gateway into Perth. We had to showcase what Perth was to our international and interstate guests. Not only did it have to look good from the ground when you're driving through it, but it needed to look good from the air. So we focused our efforts out at the Leach Highway and Tonkin Highway interchange, which you can see through here, by doing a land art basically. So it wasn't just about throwing out some seed and hoping the trees grow eventually. It was about placing them so that way they basically looked aesthetically pleasing from the air and also from the ground. We also wanted to make sure that the job looked great at night. So there's quite a lot of lighting design that's gone into it, and if you've driven through the job at night, I think before midnight though, you can see that the shields here have been turned on. I think over the finals last year, we managed to get the Dockers and Eagles colours in there a fair bit, and yeah, so it looks quite impressive. We also managed to integrate principles of crime prevention through environmental design into our urban design. So then that way, basically, people using the PSPs or the pedestrians and the cyclists felt safe because they were essentially being monitored by the travelling public on the road. We also made sure that every single underpass used by them was done so that way they could see right the way through it. We also threw in some elements of heritage within our urban design because we wanted to enhance the minimal heritage that was left there. Our heritage was primarily Aboriginal, and it was in a fairly degraded state when we got there. It was a scattered site with about 6 little chips, and that was about it. So we brought the Aboriginal community on board. We consulted with them on a regular basis, and we worked out part of our urban design to include Aboriginal heritage in it. So if you drive along Leach Highway, there are 5 key art projects through there, and 2 of them are the Welcome to Country in both Noongar and in English, as well as a featured wall of the local flora, a tessellation of the Woggle, which is the Swan River, and then also pictures of the 6 seasons that the Noongars relate to here in Perth. The other one that we did was down at the Redcliffe Park abutment walls. You can't see this from the road, unfortunately, but it's at the Dunreath Drive interchange. We employed an artist to go and do some work along there, which meant that she went to the local schools and grabbed the heritage from all of the kids in the local area. She put together this piece of artwork down here and brought in tapestries and things in the patterns of the heritage where the kids originally have come from or where their parents have come from. So it's more about representing heritage of today at this time and point in time. Now, we couldn't have sustainability without innovation. As we've heard earlier, we've introduced LED street lights on the job. They're primarily around the Leach Highway and Tonkin Highway interchange, and they were a first for Australia, which was a great thing to do. Then we've also got this interchange here. This is at the Rote Highway and Berkshire network. The interchange, it sort of brings in line a normal signalised interchange with traffic lights, but also a dog bone or a roundabout interchange. The idea is that we've got heavy industrial over here and residential through here. The safety issues at this intersection originally were so bad with the different collisions and things, so we had to work it out so that way the travelling public would remain safe. Essentially, the interchange is designed to slow down the travelling public primarily from the residential side, but also it needs to be signalised to allow the slow-moving trucks to have a go at actually getting onto the roundabout. Now, that actually covers majority of our big sustainability initiatives on the job. It was interesting when I was putting this together that this actually covered about 50% of the points that we got at ISCA, but only about 1/3 of the credits that we went for. So out of the remaining 2/3 that only made up about 50% of the rating, it just goes to show that it's really important that you try to achieve for everything that you can and not just go for the big ticket items, because they'll only get you halfway. And then just a final note about our project. We couldn't have done this in just having a silo of sustainability on the job. If Main Roads hadn't put it in the contract to begin with, if our gateway management, including our board that are here today, hadn't set it up as a key result area for us to do, if we didn't have the sustainability and environment team driving it But more importantly, if we didn't have buy-in from the entire team and having them bring the initiatives to the table and implement them, with not even necessarily thinking about sustainability, we wouldn't have had the project that we've had or the success that we've had. Thank you.